Most superstars, the moment they reach a certain level of fame, start doing one thing instinctively. They protect the spotlight. They keep it pointed at themselves, guard it carefully, and make sure every piece of attention flowing their direction stays exactly where it landed. It is not selfishness exactly, it is just how the business of being famous works at the highest level. Your name is the product, your brand is the asset, and sharing it too freely is how you dilute both. Caitlin Clark looked at that playbook and decided not to use it. When Sophie Cunningham's Adidas Player Exclusive shoe dropped, Clark did not send a quiet congratulations text and move on with her day. She praised the design on camera. She talked it up in interviews without being prompted. She told her audience directly to go check it out the moment it became available. A full platform push, the kind that brands spend millions trying to buy, handed to a teammate without hesitation and without being asked. What followed was not the wholesome moment most people expected. Instead of goodwill, both players found themselves buried under a wave of criticism that grew louder every time Clark opened her mouth about it. Comments flooded in, calling the shoe undeserved. Critics pointed at Cunningham's scoring average like it was evidence of a crime. And somewhere underneath all of that noise was an accusation that kept resurfacing, that this whole thing was favoritism dressed up as friendship, a superstar pulling strings for someone who had not earned the opportunity on her own. The accusation sounds reasonable on the surface. It falls apart the moment you look at the actual timeline. Because what really happened here is not a story about one player doing a favor for another. It's a story about loyalty that was built the hard way, a business decision backed by a full year of evidence, and a shoe release that became a flashpoint for something much bigger than footwear. And the only way to understand any of it is to start from the beginning. Not from the moment Clark started talking about it, but from the moment Cunningham started earning it. On July 24th, Adidas released the Crazy Energy Sophie Cunningham PE. Pink to gradient colorway, light blue mesh panels, orange midsole accents, a small wave logo on the side, and a custom illustration of Cunningham tucked inside the insole, where most people will never see it, but someone clearly cared enough to put it there anyway. It retailed for $120, available through Adidas.com and select retailers, including a Hibbett Sports location in Romeoville, Illinois, where Cunningham showed up in person from 1 to 3 in the afternoon to meet fans and celebrate the launch. On the surface, a shoe release, a nice one, well-designed with a proper retail rollout and a real launch event attached to it. The kind of thing that happens a dozen times a year across professional sports without drawing much attention from anyone outside the fan base of whoever's name is on the shoe. Except this one came with a detail that changes the weight of it entirely. This is the first WNBA Player Exclusive Adidas has released since Candace Parker. Let that sit for a second. Not since last season, not since a few years back, since Candace Parker, a player with 2 WNBA championships, 2 MVP awards, a Defensive Player of the Year, a Rookie of the Year, and one of the most decorated careers the league has ever produced. That is the historical company Sophie Cunningham is suddenly keeping on a list that, until this month, had exactly one name on it. A marketing department does not skip over an entire era of all-stars, MVPs, and champions and land on a player averaging roughly 9 points a game by accident. There's a reason for the choice, and that reason has nothing to do with the stat sheet. Adidas doesn't build player exclusives around box scores. It builds them around cultural reach, the specific, hard-to-manufacture ability to pull attention from people who were not already paying attention. Points per game gets you on a roster. Cultural reach gets you on a shoebox. And Cunningham has spent the past year building exactly that kind of reach, quietly and steadily, in ways that had nothing to do with Caitlin Clark's spotlight.
It started with a moment that broke through every algorithm and crossed every boundary between sports fan and casual internet user. During a game against Phoenix, an on-court confrontation escalated in a way that referee whistles and staff interventions usually handle before anyone gets a clip worth sharing. Cunningham did not wait for any of that. She locked in on the situation and held her ground for 22 straight seconds, pointing, unwavering, refusing to stand down until personnel physically walked her back. No hesitation, no calculation, pure instinct. That clip did not stay inside the WNBA bubble. It reached wrestling fan accounts. It landed on meme pages with no connection to basketball. Political commentary channels picked it up. Audiences who could not have named a single player in the league a week earlier were watching a clip from a regular season game because of how fiercely one teammate defended another. That kind of reach is not something a publicist manufactures. It is organic momentum, exactly the kind that sneaker brands spend real money trying to attach themselves to. Add to that a following on Instagram approaching 2 million, a podcast, an endorsement portfolio that was already growing before Adidas came calling, and a track record of showing up for the same brand in progressively bigger ways over a full year. From lacing up standard Adidas sneakers during regular games, to starring in a campaign for the Dame X, to now having her own colorway with her name and a custom illustration on it. That progression did not happen in a week. It did not happen because a famous teammate made a phone call. It happened because Cunningham gave Adidas a year of evidence before they gave her a shoebox. That is not how favoritism works. That is how brand relationships are built. It is also worth being specific about what kind of deal this actually is, because the distinction matters more than most of the criticism acknowledges. What Cunningham received is a player exclusive, a custom colorway of an existing silhouette, not an entirely new signature shoe designed and engineered from the ground up around her. Most player exclusives in professional sports never reach retail shelves at all. Athletes wear them on court, keep them personal, and the public never sees them for sale anywhere. Adidas choosing to put Cunningham's version into public retail distribution with a launch event and an in-person appearance attached is the brand deciding to spend real money on the belief that demand exists for her name specifically. Nobody bets real money on a player nobody wants to buy from. The commercial logic is that simple. Chelsea Gray and Jalen Williams had already worn player-exclusive colorways of the Crazy Energy silhouette before Cunningham. She is not an anomaly inserted into a program as a favor. She is the latest addition to a rotation of athletes Adidas already trusts to represent the brand in public. Her path to that rotation was earned appearance by appearance, moment by moment, over roughly 12 months. That timeline existed entirely independent of anything Caitlin Clark said or did about it publicly. Understanding why Clark said anything at all requires going back further than the shoe release, back to 2024, when Cunningham joined the Indiana Fever as part of a deliberate off-season overhaul. Clark arrived as the first overall pick, carrying a level of national attention the league had never quite seen directed at a single rookie. Every game was a media event, every foul drawn was a headline, and early in that first season, the fouls were coming regularly and coming hard in a way that officiating had not yet caught up to protecting against. When you're the most watched player in the league and you're absorbing contact almost every night, you find out quickly which teammates are going to show up for you in those moments and which ones are going to let the coaches and referees handle it. Cunningham was brought in specifically for the qualities the Fever needed around their new star: defensive intensity, physical toughness, floor spacing, and veteran composure. The front office knew what they were adding. What nobody could fully script was how quickly that basketball purpose turned into something more personal, the kind of locker room loyalty that doesn't show up in a scouting report and cannot be manufactured by any front office, no matter how carefully they build a roster around a rookie. Cunningham's first season was cut short by a torn MCL, the kind of injury that derails momentum at exactly the wrong moment, when a player is still trying to prove she belongs in a new system. She came back.
She brought everything the team needed from her and then added something the team had not specifically asked for, a genuine protective instinct toward a teammate who was navigating a spotlight that nobody else on the roster was experiencing at that level.
That instinct crested publicly in June when the Dana Bonner confrontation turned into 22 seconds that most people watching will not forget. Clark has said more than once that she will never forget Cunningham standing up for her like that on national television in front of a full arena. That statement is not promotional language. That is someone describing a moment that actually meant something. When a teammate puts herself between you in a situation in front of millions of people without hesitating for a single second, the math on what you owe her gets recalibrated permanently. So when the shoe launch arrived and Clark started spending her platform on it, the question was never really why she did it. The question is why anyone expected her not to. Clark did not stop at a repost. She talked about the design with genuine enthusiasm on camera. She brought it up in interviews unprompted, in moments where she easily could have stayed on topic and moved on. She told her audience directly to support it the moment it became available. And she described Cunningham in terms that had nothing to do with a press release. The thing she said she appreciates most about her teammate is the consistency. Fierce in every situation, never intimidated by a moment, the same player whether the team is up 20 or down 20. That is not brand language. That is someone describing a person they have actually watched show up repeatedly when it counted. That kind of full platform endorsement from Clark is not a small thing. Her name is one of the most commercially valuable in women's sports right now. Brands are actively competing to buy pieces of her attention. The idea that she would redirect a meaningful portion of it toward a teammate's shoe launch, not because she was obligated to, not because it benefited her, but because she genuinely wanted the people who protected her to be seen, is exactly the kind of detail that gets dismissed as sentimental when it is actually strategic in the deepest sense. Teams that operate on real loyalty rather than managed professionalism generate these moments continually. Clark is not spending her spotlight carelessly. She is investing it in a locker room culture that has already paid her back more than once. Predictably, the internet did not receive any of this gracefully. The moment Clark's endorsement became public, the criticism arrived fast and stayed loud. Comments called the whole thing forced, called it a marketing stunt built on friendship rather than merit, insisted that a player averaging around 9 points a game had no business receiving this kind of spotlight from a major apparel company, and that Clark was manufacturing an opportunity for someone who had not earned it independently. The scoring average argument kept surfacing like it was the definitive counterpoint to every other piece of evidence. And here's the part that reveals how selectively that argument gets applied. Nobody makes this kind of noise when a role player in the NBA lands a shoe deal. Players with similar or lower statistical profiles receive apparel partnerships in men's basketball with some regularity, and the reaction from the internet is usually silence or mild acknowledgement. The complaints materialized here, attached specifically to a name connected to Caitlin Clark's locker room. That pattern tells you something about what is actually generating the frustration, and it is not a principled concern about how shoe deals should be distributed across professional basketball. Strip the criticism down, and the real argument seems to be that Cunningham's relevance is borrowed, that she only matters because she plays next to someone more famous, and that the shoe deal is proof of a system being gamed rather than a system working exactly as designed. That reading requires ignoring a full year of brand activity, a viral moment that reached audiences far outside basketball, 2 million Instagram followers, a podcast, and a company that does not spend money on goodwill alone, making a deliberate commercial bet on her name. The distinction between borrowed relevance and built relevance is the part the Backlash keeps skipping. Cunningham did not simply stand in Clark's spotlight and absorb it passively. She built her own lane inside that spotlight through a separate following, a separate personality, a separate string of brand moments that Adidas was tracking long before Clark said a single word publicly. A player who only mattered because of proximity to a superstar does not end up with the first WNBA Player Exclusive Adidas has produced since one of the most decorated players in league history. Adidas is a business. Businesses do not make bets on borrowed credibility. There is also something worth examining in the specific target the Backlash chose to land on.
Clark amplified the shoe launch. She did not create Cunningham's viral moment. She did not manufacture the following that preceded it. She did not negotiate the deal or appear in the campaign or design the colorway. She saw a teammate who had earned a real opportunity and decided to use her platform to make sure more people were watching when it arrived. And the response to that decision was to accuse her of favoritism, which asks her implicitly to behave less like a good teammate, specifically because she is famous enough for her support to carry weight. That is a strange standard to hold anyone to, and it becomes even stranger when you consider that Clark has spent a significant portion of her career being criticized for the opposite, for supposedly not doing enough for the players around her, for not being vocal enough about her teammates, for keeping her brand in its own lane. Now she does the thing critics claimed they wanted her to do, and the same energy shows up repackaged as a new complaint. There is no version of Clark's behavior here that would have satisfied this particular audience. If she had stayed quiet and let the launch pass without comment, the criticism would have been about indifference, that the league's biggest star does not lift up the people around her. She speaks up, and the criticism becomes about favoritism. When every possible action produces the same negative reaction, the problem is not the action. The problem is that the audience was never engaging with what she was actually doing in the first place. That tells you everything you need to know about where this criticism is coming from and how seriously it deserves to be taken. Real sports criticism engages with evidence and stays open to being wrong. It looks at a shot chart or a defensive scheme or a roster decision and builds an argument from there. What followed Cunningham's shoe announcement mostly skipped that step, jumping immediately to a conclusion about who deserves attention and then working backwards to find support for it. That shortcut is the difference between a legitimate question and an internet pylon. Both can use the same words, only one of them is actually engaging with the facts. The legitimate version of the question, why does this player receive this spotlight when other talented players in this league rarely get this kind of moment, is worth asking. The WNBA is full of players who have spent long careers without receiving the commercial attention their talent deserved, and some of the frustration attached to Cunningham's deal reflects that real and reasonable grievance. The problem is where the frustration ends up landing. Cunningham's deal did not take anything away from those players. Adidas investing in her name did not close a door that was open to someone else. The anger makes more sense as a reaction to the league's historical underinvestment in its own stars than it does as a reaction to this specific shoe at this specific moment. What is actually happening across the WNBA right now is the opposite of contraction. Nike's success with player-specific shoes for other stars in the league has already demonstrated that real consumer demand exists for WNBA player products at a scale that barely existed a few years ago. Adidas is not gambling on a trend that might materialize, it is responding to one that already has. And choosing Cunningham as one of the players worth investing in reflects a read on where genuine commercial upside lives, not a favor to a teammate, not a marketing department throwing dice, but a brand looking at 12 months of evidence and deciding the bet was worth making. Step back from the shoe entirely, and the more interesting story is what this whole sequence reveals about the Fever as an organization, and about Clark specifically as a teammate. Two players on the same roster now have shoe deals from major apparel companies. Nike's signature shoe is set to debut later this year. That is not a coincidence produced by one player's generosity. That is what happens when a franchise builds genuine star power at multiple positions, and when the players on that roster actively choose to lift each other rather than compete for a limited pool of attention.
It is also what happens when a locker room runs on real trust instead of managed professionalism, when the relationships underneath the team are built from actual moments rather than choreographed team chemistry.
Clark could protect her own endorsements, stay in her lane, and let the attention around her exist separately from the players she shares a floor with. She keeps choosing not to. That choice is not free. It costs her a portion of the goodwill she spends every time she redirects attention somewhere else, and it costs her a predictable wave of criticism from people who will find something wrong with it regardless of what she does. She makes the choice anyway, because the loyalty Cunningham showed her during her rookie year was real, and because spending platform on people who earned it is exactly what platform is for. A locker room where the most famous player behaves this way tends to keep producing moments like this one, not because they are engineered from the top down, but because the trust underneath them is genuine. Real trust has a way of compounding over time. It shows up in moments no scouting report could have predicted, in a veteran who fights through a torn MCL and comes back to defend her rookie teammate with 22 seconds of unwavering eye contact on national television. Whatever happens next for either of these players, 2 moments are already locked in regardless of what the comment sections decide to argue about. The first is 22 seconds of a teammate refusing to back down in front of a full arena and a national broadcast, the kind of instinctive loyalty that cannot be manufactured for a highlight reel and cannot be faked for the benefit of a camera. The second is a superstar choosing to spend her own platform making sure that loyalty got paid back in public view, not quietly, not in a way that protected her from criticism, but openly and repeatedly because she wanted people to know who showed up for her when it actually mattered. Everything else, the scoring average arguments, the comment sections, the accusations of favoritism, the noise about who deserves what, is sitting on top of those 2 moments without touching either of them. Sophie Cunningham did not need Caitlin Clark's permission to matter. She built the reach, survived the injury, earned the moment, and put in the brand work that gave Adidas a reason to make the bet. Clark did not need anyone's permission to say so out loud. She had a platform, a teammate who had earned the attention, and no interest in pretending otherwise. That is the whole story, and it was never really about a shoe.